pretty much never really. Whoa. Ah, there we go. Look at me. Bringing back old fonts. I still like that. I still like that image, man. I need to bring it back. You know what I'm saying? What's up with y'all tonight? You good? It's your man Donald King. I'm here to make you sing Loving You. Man, you know what pisses me off? It's like, for some reason, call it a quirk of reality or whatever, but my flesh isn't able to keep pace with my my abilities, right? So it's like when I try to sing, for some reason my entire life I've had really bad like nasal congestion, thick mucus and whatnot. So it's like, especially during like certain times of the year here in the Midwest. So it's like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, you know, I got, my ear knows where notes are supposed to be. My mind knows where notes are supposed to be, but my voice doesn't always cooperate. Which is why I tell people I can't sing. Because I know where the note placement is supposed to be. Maybe my voice might work with me. Maybe it won't. It depends on the day. Who knows? But I was it's easy 'cause you're beautiful. I know where all the notes are, but my voice is just like, F you, no, we're not going to play along. All my vocal cords, they're together like, no! We are in protest! But anyway, yeah, man. Wild days. Wild days. My life is like a comic book. Now, I'm not the author of the comic book. I'm just kind of going through the motions. You know, it plays out how it will, I suppose. But, you know, it's lots of ups and downs, highs and lows, curves and twists. Right? One of the biggest issues that I face is, because I perform in the way that I do, I have a tendency to attract detractors. People who want to compete against and or invalidate me for whatever reason, well, for the express purpose of defending and protecting their inner story. That is the collection of meanings, symbols, beliefs, habits, practices, social effects, and treatments that give them a sense of purpose, value, and meaning within the world. I say things that invalidate people's sense of self and people's sense of worth. Today I've answered a couple of different inboxes with people asking me streams of questions, and then it's like I've been on threads, a couple of threads today, you know, back and forth with some of my bros and whatnot. And lots of people ask me questions. Now see, I never mind answering questions. I like to answer questions, and I love when people ask me questions, right? The thing is, most of the questions people ask me have absolutely nothing to do with them gaining proper understanding for what I'm talking about. They're sort of searching for, probing and prodding for weaknesses to exploit in my position, right? Enter the subject of defensive questions versus exploratory questions, right? So what is a defensive question? A defensive question is a question that is used like a weapon. It's designed to probe for weaknesses and break down, I guess, critical points of failure within streams of logic. And I probably could have said that better, but when you ask a defensive question is kind of like a sword or a knife. You go, ding, 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 ding. Ah, yeah, right there. That's where we puncture. So that I can win. Conversely, exploratory questions, they're meant to help you gain proper understanding. If you recall in my literature and or in earlier podcasts, do you know the difference between a weapon and a tool? A tool is an instrument you use to accomplish tasks with and or advance in some way, shape, or form. A tool assists you towards betterment. Conversely, a weapon is designed to subdue others and or break them down. It's meant to basically push people back, put them on the back hill, and or make them flee from you so as to defend yourself. Which raises the question, what types of questions do you ask? Do you ask questions that are designed to defend your inner story and the system of agreements you've come up with yourself, come up with and hold to yourself? Are you asking questions that sort of help you learn how to explore the world around you better? Where does your mind lie? You see, defensive questions, they always circle back to authority. Every defensive question always traces back to one core question, and that core question is, by what authority do you speak? What gives you the authority to say this? So take what gives you the authority to say this and translate it in a couple of different ways. How do you know? Who agrees with you? Can you find evidence to support your claim? Circles back to, by what authority do you speak? And that actually leads to an even better question, which is, what gives you authority over me? What makes your inner story and or your identity more valid than mine? It's a very aggressive way to interact with people. When you ask defensive questions, you're necessarily trying to compete against them. You're trying to subdue them. You're trying to dominate them. Again, when you are competing against someone, to compete means to, in essence, attempt to dominate another in some way, shape, or form. It's attempting to assert authority over them by virtue of stealing authority from them. You have no authority. I have the authority to tell you you have no authority. I have the power to subdue you to me. Conversely, exploratory questions, they're meant to help you gain proper understanding for something. So let's say someone's talking about something that you don't understand completely. Well, you ask them questions about what they're saying, but you see, your inquiries are matched by what I refer to in my work as connective reasoning. So when you're asking exploratory questions, you're asking people to fill in missing information so that you can use connective reasoning to create sort of a schema of what they're talking about, and you can create a conceptual frame and model so that you arrive at a space and point of understanding. Hey, now you said this, this, and this, but how does this connect to this? Because I follow you to this point, but I don't know how you make this leap from here to here. That's a person probing for information so that they can finish building this conceptual model in their mind so that they can arrive in a state of understanding. When you're dealing with defensive questions, there's no desire to understand the person. There's only a desire to defeat them. You're not certain. There's no connective reasoning going on. You're not saying, okay, so this fits together with that, and that fits together with that. So where are we missing information towards helping this become a standalone conceptual model or framing device in my mind? When you're exploring for information you're trying to understand, and when you're asking questions trying to defeat another person's position, you are necessarily defending your inner story. You're necessarily defending your own values, your own sense of righteousness, your pride, your competitive spirit, everything that sources back to your identity. You know, I've been talking about this a lot lately, but, you know, there are a lot of people who are deathly afraid of and afraid to encounter things that invalidate their inner story. Problem is, reality itself invalidates the inner story. And you see, if you go around barking at everything that doesn't reflect your internal narrative back to you, you're inevitably going to end up barking at reality itself. Take, for instance, sexual identity, right? Sexual identity. Now, I don't have anything against people who are non-binary in terms of, you know, who and what they prefer to stimulate their genitals towards achieving orgasm. I'm not opposed to people being selective about who plays with their jiggly bits in order to make them come. But you see, when you start building an identity around who you like fondling your junk, you in essence enter into a state of psychosis. Psychosis, again, being an inability to distinguish the internal narrative from reality itself. You see, who you like fondling your junk, it can't make you a type of human being. It can't. If you could argue that being, I don't know, sort of partial towards one type of person playing with your genitalia and subsequently you getting, you know, these dopamine and oxytocin and vasopressin releases for which your ego parasite feeds on, then you could make the same argument that a person who, say, is addicted to heroin or addicted to alcohol is in fact a protected category, because how they prefer to get their chemical releases could be argued as a sexual preference. Who you like to play with your junk can't make you a type of person. It certainly doesn't come with behavioral and attitudinal trends and effects that translate from one person to the next. But being partial to who you allow to or feel comfortable with fondling your genitalia can't make you an evil person either. All of that, in terms of morality, happens completely in idealism. It happens completely in idealism. Right? Now, when you take that same model and you apply, let's say, let me see, because there was a point that I was going to make in between that point. This is the problem with reading principles. It's like you have to scan through screens and shit like that. But basically, what was I just talking about? I was talking about people and them having this belief that who fondles your genitals can make you a type of person. This exists in idealism, and it is an identity. It is an identity. Identity has nothing to do with who, how, and what you are in reality. If you were born male with XY chromosome, how you feel inside and who you feel most comfortable bonding with has no bearing on what you are in reality. Even if you go so far as to alter yourself surgically or using aesthetic treatments and effects and things of this nature, it doesn't affect what you are in reality and how you are in reality at a fundamental level. However, and let me just make sure that I say this very cleanly. It doesn't affect your identity, doesn't affect what you are. The identity exists exclusively in idealism. Now, when you start asking defensive questions towards defending your identity, how do you know this? And how do you know that? And how do you know this? And how do you know that? You create a scenario in which you can't sync up with reality. Why? Because defensive questions are meant to defeat information, not absorb and consider it. Defensive questions are designed to defeat information and defeat presenters of information, not consume, organize, process, and output information, ideas, and expressions cleanly and efficiently in real time. You don't need to defend the identity, people. The identity is a fiction. Who you think you are today will change with exposure to new information and new experiences and age. What you think motivates you towards the world right now will inevitably change. Your identity will change with exposure to reality. Therefore, there's no reason for you to defend your identity ever, because it's always going to change. It is always going to change. Most people are afraid to have their identity change, which is why they experience great deals of cognitive dissonance whenever they encounter people and things that challenge their core beliefs, that fundamentally undermine their core beliefs. It's why so many people don't like me. There's no reason to dislike me, ever, under any circumstance. Even if you're a dick to me, unless you insist on being a dick, at which point I have to cut you out of my life. Even if you're a dick to me, 9 times out of 10, I'm still going to be nice to you. I know every single person that doesn't like me. Even the ones that I hang around that let me, or who are of the impression that I don't know that they don't like me. I know who doesn't like me, and I'm still, hey, what's up? I understand why you feel this way. And you know what? That doesn't stop me from standing in your corner to the best of my ability until you decide to aggress against me, in which case, I gotta wash my hands of you, but there's no reason to dislike me for any reason whatsoever. None. But people dislike me because, well, I invalidate their inner story. The things that I say don't make them feel as though they're correct. And if they're not correct, by virtue of the socialization process, why? They don't deserve to be rewarded. They don't deserve the prize. That's what school taught you, right? If you're right, you get the reward, and if you're wrong, you get punished, humiliated, reviled, ostracized. So most people are deathly afraid of anything that says they're wrong. And if you're an avatar, you come along reading principles of reality that don't reflect people's inner stories back to them, why, by default, you are necessarily saying that people are wrong, in which case people are going to dislike you a great deal. Going to plot against you, be scared and angry, and yeah. It's a lot. It's a lot to deal with. But I understand why it happens. But at the end of the day, people are afraid of things that say they're wrong. What happens when reality itself says you're wrong? What happens when reality itself shows you or points you in the direction of things that suggest the core system of agreements you use to make sense of the world with are invalid. Do you ask reality defensive questions, or do you ask exploratory questions? Science and the scientific method, it is, better yet, an apparatus that is meant to help manufacture and protect systems of exploratory questions. That's why science doesn't take definitive stances on things. You've never read a true scholarly article that ends with a definitive claim. Why? Because when you're trying to explore things, you don't rush to say how they are. When you're trying to understand things properly, even with a decent amount of evidence backing you, you don't jump to definitive conclusions. You let networks of conclusions create strong sort of axiomatic basis, but you still don't assume that anything is one particular way or another. Why? Because idealism in itself, the system through which humans process information and reality, is fundamentally flawed. So even when science performs at its best, science only says, we have a pretty strong idea of how this goes. We have a pretty strong idea of how this is supposed to be. And then something comes along that invalidates that idea, and the scientific method, when employed properly, moves in the direction of whatever's most or more consistent with reality. The world is flat, and we know this because we can see the ocean and it's flat. And then, hey, I theorize that the world is a globe. Centuries later, come up with GPS systems, and it verifies, hey, the world is a globe. And then people thinking in terms of authority, like, no, we still argue that the world is flat. Yeah. This is the way it works. You're either trying to understand or trying to be right, but never both. When you ask exploratory questions, you're trying to understand. When you ask defensive questions, you're trying to be right. When you ask exploratory questions, you're trying to explore. When you're asking defensive questions, you're trying to defeat and shut down. You're trying to understand, or you're trying to be right, but never both. And types of questions that I take issue with mostly are defensive questions. Now, I do say that there is some use in defensive questions because me being an avatar, that's a pretty tall order. Let's just be honest. That's a man, just the fact that things like that even exist, it's so far outside of our realm of experience that, I mean, for someone to make such grandiose claims, it seems outlandish. It seems ridiculous. I know that if I were still of the materialist mind, I would think any person coming to me claiming to be what I purport to be, again, I'm not trying to sell you on that, I would think they were fucking crazy. I would think they were a lunatic. But then, when you start really sort of delving into human intellectualism and realizing that the majority of the things that we think make us brilliant are emergent from within the last century alone. Like, let's even just look at it in the grand scheme of things. Look at the age of this planet. It's allegedly somewhere in the area of 13 billion years old or something like that. When you start looking at all of the ages that humans have gone through, like the Bronze Age and the Age of Enlightenment and the Industrial Age, etc. Look at the within 13 billion years. How long is 2,000 some odd years compared to 13 billion years? 5,000, 6,000. Let's even round it up to a good 50,000 years. Let's say humans have been around, or some variation of humans have been around for 50,000 years. When you start looking at the planet being 13 billion years old, 13 billion plus years old, around the sun, what is a couple of thousand? What's even 100,000 compared to a billion? What? So what do we know? What do we know? Nobody should ever be asking defensive questions about anything, because we don't, as collectively as a species, we don't have enough insight. We don't have enough intelligence. We don't have enough time being intelligent to speak definitively on anything. So you've never met an avatar before. Okay, how often do avatars come along? Would you have even been intelligent enough to recognize an avatar prior to the stage of intellectual development you're in as a species right now? Reality doesn't begin and end with the human experience. It doesn't. There's all sorts of shit in reality that you haven't had exposure to. There's all sorts of shit on this planet. There are creatures walking around, even in domesticated areas, that have yet to be discovered by humans. Even in colonized and populated areas, there are species walking around that y'all still haven't come across yet. Still. Who are you to say what is and isn't possible? Why would you make agreements with yourself about what is and isn't possible, what can and cannot be, when your intelligence is this big within the grand scheme of reality? And by this big, I'm talking about if reality were scaled to the size of the galaxy we're in right now. Human intelligence is this big in a galaxy of intelligence and possibility and discovery. So when you ask questions based on defending your identity, that is, based on defending your inner story, the collection of meanings, symbols, beliefs, habits, practices, and social effects and treatments you've internalized and seek to self-actualize through, you're saying, why doesn't reality fit into my tiny box? Does our galaxy fit into the space between my fingers? Realistically, no, it does not. So when you ask questions trying to be right, trying to attack and invalidate a position other than yours, it's an exercise in futility. Because to do so is to assume that you know everything already. That there is nothing left in existence and in reality for you to happen across that might alter your perception and understanding of reality. Who are you to say what is and isn't possible? Who are you to say that something that doesn't fit with or conform to the system of agreements you come up with and or internalized must be wrong? Why must everything fit into the boxes that you know how to make sense of things with? Who says your boxes are big enough? Who says they're deep enough, wide enough? Who says they're complex enough or shaped properly to hold all the things you try to fit into them? The folly of pride. Pride will get you fucked up with reality. Pride will get you fucked up with reality. There's no scenario in which that's not the case. Pride is the gateway to corruption. Pride is the gateway to corruption. When you are so proud and so confident in the system of agreements you make sense of the world with, that you refuse to consider things that don't conform to you, you necessarily make an enemy out of the system of reality itself. Who are you? Who are you to say what is what? Who are you to try? Who are you to try to defeat others with your knowledge? What knowledge do you have? How can any human have knowledge? Knowledge that is derivative from institutional wisdom when the institutions themselves are still trying to reverse engineer reality towards imbuing the species with greater understanding for a system they're fundamentally divorced from. If the institutions you call on and use to support your position are still searching for answers, who are you to jump the gun and say that you have them when they don't? Ask exploratory questions. So let's actually get into that a little bit. So I'm saying don't ask defensive questions. Don't ask questions designed to defend your inner story. Don't ask other people how they know they're not right, or how they know they're right, and how do they know you're not right. And again, this all traces back to authority. What gives you the authority? What makes your authority greater than mine? It's competitive. It's pointless. You don't learn that way. Okay? But what you can do is ask exploratory questions. That means that it's like, in order to ask exploratory questions, you actually have to create a map, a model in your mind of what the other person is saying. And then once you have it modeled out and you see little gaps and holes there and there, then you're kind of like, hey, this area over here doesn't connect to this area over here. Something is missing in between them. Let me ask a question to see if they can fill in this space to help me finish building out this conceptual model. That's how you gain proper understanding for things. You don't ask people how they know you're not right. You try to understand them. How do I understand you? How do I understand you better? You ask exploratory questions. Exploratory questions, again, it consists of two parts. One, you sort of creating, you read, first of all, like if you're going back and forth with someone in something that can be read, you go back and you make sure that it's like you read over everything that they said. You form a map inside your mind of the conceptual landscape they've just supplied to you, and then you see where they're missing parts, and then from there you can ask questions to help fill in the parts that they were unable to supply to you through their explanation. However, it necessarily entails you explaining back to them the things that they said, and then responding to the things that they said to make sure that you understand them properly. You learn exponentially faster this way. You learn exponentially faster that way. Like, okay, so, and that's something that I had to learn. I used to hate reading things and studying, and especially doing budgetary maths. I used to hate education. I hated academia with a passion, right? Then I got into a situation where it's like, I'm like, oh man, well, shit, maybe I never gave this a fair shake. So instead of focusing on why it was stupid and why it was beneath me and why I shouldn't have to do it, I started sort of perusing content, reading through shit and being like, oh, well, okay, they said this, this, and this, but how does it connect to that? And I started again sort of creating conceptual models in my head and realizing where there were flaws, fatal errors in logic, or missing pieces here and there. And then sort of taking in information and sort of mapping it out in my brain and seeing how shit fits and flows together. It became a treat, a rare treat. Yo, how does this function? Not, how does this prove I'm right about how stupid it is? That little paradigm shift, it helped me get to a point where I could learn better. I could understand content properly because I could be honest with myself and my motivations towards things I was learning and why I either needed to or didn't. I stopped defending my inner story, and all of a sudden taking in information became exponentially easier to do. But again, you can either be right or reasonable, but you can't be both. Reasoning, consuming, organizing, processing, and outputting information, ideas, and expressions cleanly and efficiently in real time. Being right, blocking information and reality out in order to preserve a settled upon view, in order to preserve a belief, in order to preserve an agreement you made with yourself about how something is. Think about it like this. I want you to imagine two people come to you telling you about an event they witnessed, right? First person you like very much, it's like a friend or family member, somebody you feel close to. Second is somebody who you don't like at all. Right? Person who comes to you, who you don't like at all, they say, hey man, this thing happened. Oh, well, I mean, yeah, you say that happened, but how do you know for sure that that's what happened? You're not trying to understand the information. You're letting your perception of the person get in the way of you actually consuming and organizing and processing and outputting the information cleanly and efficiently in real time. Your cognitive bias causes you to experience cognitive dissonance at the person and prevents you from consuming and processing the information. You start challenging their authority as opposed to figuring out the validity of the information. That's what happens with most people when they deal with me. Then conversely, somebody comes to you who you trust and or who you revere and see as an authority figure, and they tell you the exact same information. How do you respond? Oh man, word? Oh man, okay, this is cool. You take what they say on authority. You take what they say on authority, even though you never critically challenge what they're talking about or try to understand it from beyond how you're affected by it, or how they affect you, how they impact onto you in an emotional way. So your biases necessarily impact your ability to process information and reality cleanly and efficiently. Whenever you ask defensive questions, you're always asking from a space of bias. When you're biased, you can't process information properly. Which is why it's good to distance yourself from all things that sort of reinforce and exacerbate narcissism, competitiveness, and aggression. When you're narcissistic, self-idealizing, and self-aggrandizing, hyper-competitive, and aggressive, you're always going to be in a triggerable state. You lead into everything with biases that are always skewed to you and your interests, and as such, it makes it practically impossible for you to consume and process information properly. It's wild reading principles, man. Reading principles is wild. The reason why I mention that is because I don't know if I've covered this subject before in the podcast series. I'm curious to know if I have. But that's, again, one of the things about dealing and reading principles is the fact that, well, it comes with some benefits and also some setbacks. So the benefits are you don't have to remember anything. That also in itself is, well, it can be a setback because you might double over some things that you've covered before. And I don't know if I covered this before, but it's worth running back again. This subject. Are you trying to understand things properly? Or are you trying to be right? When you ask questions, are you trying to defend your identity? Or are you trying to explore things on their terms, where they are, for what they are, and how they are? What are you doing? Are you trying to defeat reality with weapons you use like questions you use like weapons? Are you trying to use questions like tools to explore reality and advance in terms of understanding? Which is it? Because you can't do both. Which is wild. Like when you start thinking about how scientific authority works, scientific authority is an oxymoron. So at the institutional level, when people start trying to assert authority, they necessarily violate the I guess premise of the scientific method. Scientists are now saying, no. Researchers are now saying, no, that's not how science works. New studies suggest that. Now that is more scientific. New studies suggest that. That's scientific. Scientists say, yeah. Scientists believe, nah, you're delving into idealism. You're trying to assert authority. That's not scientific anymore. It's not just by how the apparatus works. It's not scientific anymore. And that's when I start getting like, my spidey sense goes off when they start trying to make definitive claims using science as a platform to assert authority by way of that. It's counterintuitive. If you understand how the scientific process works at a mechanical level, it's counterintuitive. It becomes they create scientific authority as an oxymoron. Because the goal of science isn't to assert authority. The goal of science isn't to be right. It's to explore and to move people in the direction of learning reality and getting consistent with reality. Every single person who comes to me with their biases and presuppositions regarding my mental state and health, they've already disqualified themselves and their position from objective consideration because they led with bias. Not by Donald King standards, by scientific standards. When you lead into something with a hard bias, you're not performing in a scientific way. So they come across a man claiming to be an avatar. How do they respond? Do they approach it scientifically? Well, I've never encountered an avatar before. I know that, there are things in realities that humans have not measured or encountered before. Maybe this is one of those phenomena. Let's explore. Or do they assume that I must somehow be defective because I don't reflect their inner story back to them? Which is more scientific? Leading with exploratory questions or leading with defensive questions? I'm going to tell you right now, as a species, you're dumb. You're fucking dumb. Y'all let pride do the majority of the thinking for you. Any species that still lets their pride do the majority of the thinking for them is fucking stupid. Period. Your pride isn't even attached to territorialism. Like, you look at animals being territorial. I mean, you know, we perceive what they do as pride, but you know, it has to do with more of systems of natural organization, which I'll get into in subsequent videos. But the systems of natural organization, and I guess I can cover it. It's like it's reality communicating to these things. Hey, to these life forms that are natural. Hey, so far as I understand, and let me qualify it as saying such. Hey, I need you to perform this particular behavior and to impact upon this system in such a way that will create new types of emergent growth for future life forms to subsist on. Humans are like, oh no, they fight for pride. They fight for this. They fight for that. Because y'all idealism, you keep projecting your inner story onto everything you perceive. It makes you dumb. And then you double down on it and you make agreements with yourself about how things are in reality, and it makes you fucking dumb. It makes you perform as a stupid species. It makes you fucking sound retarded. You sound dumb. This is how things are. Shut up. Y'all are still learning. The best and brightest of you are still learning. The best and brightest of you are at the institutional level trying to learn, and they're out gathering information. Even perusing through my content, trying to create schemas and shit like that in order to create new knowledge systems for you all to ultimately benefit from one day. Yet you ask these questions, attempting to defeat things that don't reflect your inner story back to you, as if your inner story is somehow developed enough for you to have worked out all of reality and all of possibility. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. You haven't encountered everything in life. You haven't encountered everything in reality. You haven't encountered everything on this planet. You don't know what is and isn't. So to form hard agreements with yourself about whether or not people are legitimate or things are legitimate or right or wrong, it's an exercise in futility. It makes no sense. You don't have enough information to go on. Don't form hard agreements about things you haven't properly explored. Get rid of defensive questions. Hey, how are you? What are you? How does this work? Explain it. Help me form a conceptual framework in my mind that I can map out, and then when I see that there are like weaknesses or points of conflict where there's overlap or incongruency in whatever shape or form, I can question these things and then, if need be, challenge what you're saying, or conversely, try to figure out where the failure of reconciliation falls. But you don't need to make hard agreements with yourself, guys. You don't. It's an exercise in futility. I am exactly what I tell you I am, even though I don't try to push it on you. I'm exactly what I tell you I am, and how things are going in reality and what I'm describing to you is 100% accurate. And I'm not saying this based on my personal feelings and beliefs. I've compared what I see through this perspective to the best convention that I can find and get access to, and everything that I see is exponentially more consistent with no gaping holes than everything that you all have been able to produce so far. I'm not making this shit up. I'm not talented enough to. I'm just not. I see it. I report it. I compare what I see and the notes that I make based on the things that I see to what I can find in convention, and what I see comes out on top every time. Every single fucking time. Don't try to defeat me with your little questions. You're not gonna. The best and brightest among this species can't. They can't. Even with extraterrestrial AI on your side, you cannot defeat my position, because I'm not talking about my ideas. I'm not talking about ways to reverse engineer systems and figure out how to create artifacts from them towards enhancing my natural deficits and limitations. I'm describing what I can see. I'm reading a screen versus ideas you all form, and what I see on the screen is exponentially more consistent than the ideas you're able to form through the entire system of idealism. I say that confidently, and if someone can prove that I'm wrong, I welcome it. I welcome it. And you know the best part about it is, if someone proves that what I'm saying is wrong and that I'm full of shit, you know what I do? Damn. I guess I didn't think about that before. I didn't see that before. Let me go ahead and switch over to whatever you see, because, hell, you're more consistent with reality than me. By the way, no one has commented tonight. I don't know if anybody's watching. Especially with the last couple of podcasts, it's like, either I'm shadow banned or people are scared of me because I'm going after and we're breaking down conceptual structures. Humans base a lot of their justification for defending corruption on. We're breaking these systems down. We're breaking them down. If you have commented, I don't know. I haven't seen. So, sometimes people do comment and it comes back in on the. I'll see it after the podcast is ended. I see that I have 4 notifications, but those are probably to other posts and things of that nature. But yeah, keeping with my Mondays and Wednesdays podcast. Stop asking defensive questions, guys. They don't help you learn. Stop being so scared of things that don't reflect your identity back to you, that you feel the need to fucking defeat them all the time. Difference between being brave and being cowardly is simply this. When you're brave, you know that you are ill-equipped to face reality, but you stand naked in the face of reality, open-handed, chin up, chest out, knowing your limitations, knowing that it might hurt, but resolve and to press forward anyway. When you're cowardly, you retreat into your inner story. You surround yourself with your feelings and meanings and beliefs and symbols that are designed to make you feel whole in ways that you're not in reality. You don't get whole by doubling down on your identity. You get whole by shirking it. By stepping into the storm, getting beat up a little, but strengthened in the process of getting beaten up. Yeah, your identity has to take a few hits, especially when you come across things such as myself, who challenge everything you think you know about the world, what is and isn't possible. How do you face it? By trying to explore it and understand it? By trying to explore it and understand it? Or by trying to invalidate it so that you can preserve your feelings and beliefs? Which is it? Because you can't do both. You cannot do both. Anywho, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Got to get her done. Running a little short of an hour, but that's cool. Guys, you know what it is. First of all, for those of you all who've been inboxing me and thanking me for all of the, for all the work that I've been putting in through the years and really showing me love for the ways in which you benefit from what I do, I can't thank you enough. Thank you. A lot of days I feel real invisible doing this. Again, I'm not doing this for fun. I'm doing this because I've been charged to. It's my life purpose. It's what I'm supposed to do. There are a lot of days that it's like, if it were up to me, I would have given this up, man. But it's not. And I gotta see this through. Even when it gets uncomfortable. And just the knowledge, the fact that somebody sees the effort, it means more to me than you can imagine. So I thank you. Guys, you can find me on Facebook Live. I shoot these on Mondays and Wednesdays. And in addition to that, I'm on Instagram. I shoot videos Instagram every now and again. Also, I fly all these podcasts over to my YouTube channel, so you can check them out there. I think this is podcast 75 or 76. It might be 76. Man, these are flying. And then also I post content to Medium. I have so much content. I know that they keep tabs on me, but it's like I'm wondering. It's like if I'm wondering how big the file on me is, because my God, I put out so much content. It's insane. I mean, like, geez, it's like, well, I guess I'll know once I'm out of this body, but still. Anywho, if you get any sort of appreciation out of what I do, and you just want to bless your boy with a little bit of love, you can always join the Patreon family. I am Avatar Cycle XIII. That's Avatar Cycle 13. That is also my tag for my Instagram. And if you just want to salt bay your boy with a little bit of love for tonight's podcast and whatever, or just in general, you can always hit me up on Cash App. I'm Dane Kang. Yeah, man. Proceeds go to building this up to a larger platform. I want to reach as many people as I can while I'm still in this form. And there's so much more that still has to be said and has to be done. I mean, my God, you have no idea how momentous this task is. Dude, I swear to God, if I knew what it entailed on the front end, I probably would have went running for the hills, because there's no way you can be prepared to do. It's like someone saying, here's a pair of tweezers. Now you're going to transfer 1 grain of sand at a time from here to there. But don't look up. And you're transferring 1 grain of sand over. And you look, and one day you accidentally look up and you're like, what the fuck? And it turns out that you're transferring 1 grain of sand at a time with tweezers from one beach to another. It's insane. The more you build your tools out is the more that you get, like, you're no longer working with tweezers. You're sort of working with little shovels and then backhoes and you keep building. You keep building, and before you know it, when you're not focused on the momentous task in front of you, and you focus on the little bits that you're able to do at a time, one day you look up and you see how far you come, and you're like, wow, if I had any idea of how intense and laborious and painful this was going to be on the front end, I probably never would have done it. That's how I feel about being an avatar most days. If I hadn't known, I probably would have been running for the hills, man. Which is why I'm glad I didn't know. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm proud, but hopefully I've done a good job. For those of you all who appreciate what I'm able to do and what I've been able to do, thank you. Anywho, so let's wrap this up. Again, defensive questions versus exploratory questions. Defensive questions are meant to defend the identity. Exploratory questions are meant to help you gain better understanding for things. Practice employing exploratory questions over always using defensive questions. Defensive questions make you dumber. Exploratory questions make you smarter. It's really that simple. It's your man. I'm out.